And Australia defeated New Zealand, bagging the T20 World Championships. They are the new champions. We're going to be decoding their performance with Nikhil Nas and Sunil Gavaskar on this special show. Take a look.
Now to look back at this very, very fine game, we have with us Sunil Gavaskar. Sunil bhai, what I said right at the start, when it comes to big games, you have to write off Australia at your own peril, won't you?
Exactly. I mean, their record is awesome, isn't it? In the knockout stages, particularly of these big events, they somehow seem to find that little extra to get through. And they've played some superb cricket over the last couple of weeks to get here. Well, first time, but fully deserving.
Sunil, if you remember, we spoke about this big final and I highlighted that record that Australia have over New Zealand. And you mentioned that sometimes, you can have that sort of psychological advantage. Did you see any sort of residue of that?
In the way some of the New Zealand bowlers bowled, they seem to be a little bit scared of bowling to the Australians. Yes, Warner and Mitchell Marsh were really clobbering the ball. But this is a big game. This is where you stand up for your team, and that is what didn't quite happen with some of the New Zealand bowlers, a couple of the New Zealand bowlers in particular, and that is the reason why they have to take the silver spoon.
I know I'll get to the fine performances by Australia a little later, but the biggest talking point right now, I'm looking at social media, everyone is saying that this is, win the toss and win the tournament sort of a, encounter that we've seen. We saw it during the semi-finals as well. How fair is that assessment?
Well, I mean, if you were listening to the commentators, they were saying that the dew factor wasn't there today. There wasn't that much dew at all. So I don't think that really came into play in this game. But yes, I think it has in the previous games, and maybe that is something that needs to be looked at. But then again, you might turn around and say, look, if the group matches are played, say at the same time, then why change for the knockouts? Why make it a little bit different? But again, I think that is something for the ICC cricket committee to get their heads around and make sure that that everything looks as if it's it's a level playing field for both the teams.
And we spoke about how good this pitch might just be. It was a new strip that they used, and probably now in hindsight, looking back, and you spoke about 180, that could have been that total, could have challenged, but looking at the way the Aussies batted, probably 200 might not have been enough.
Yes, that is correct. I think Mitchell Marsh played an extraordinary innings. David Warner in the last 3 matches has upped his game, and he again was one of the man that New Zealand wanted more than Aaron Finch, but they didn't get him, and so there you are. So you're absolutely right. They won with 6 balls to spare. Maxwell and Marsh at the crease. Those 6 balls could have gone for 20 runs as well, and they could have won in the 20th over.
Okay, I'm going to talk about the 2 stars for Australia with the bat, David Warner and Mitchell Marsh. Let's start with David Warner. Sunil bhai, talks about his resilience. He's the same guy just about a month and a half ago, was not only dropped from his IPL team, was made to sit in the hotel and said that, listen, you don't even need to come to the ground because we can only take those limited players there to the ground. So was sitting in the hotel room, supporting his IPL team. At that point, I'm guessing he must be wondering what the future really holds for him, whether he'll ever be, playing that sort of cricket, which IPL team will get him. But look at the way he's really bounced back in just a month and a half.
Well, that is where your temperament comes through. I think the belief in yourself, you've done it before, that as a cricketer, you will go through these ups and downs. That was a bit hard, to be honest, making him sit in the hotel while some pretty ordinary players who were not going to be playing in the 11 were at the ground. That was, unless there was something more to it. But he was the captain that won them the trophy. And one would have thought that him being at the ground, if not in the playing 11, would have been just the kind of, encouragement for the team. Maybe he could have seen something from outside, being a leader, and given some instructions to the team how to go about it. Because look at what Sunrisers did. Sunrisers didn't do anything. I think they finished, at the bottom of the table, didn't they? And you can't really put the blame on David Warner. Maybe in the first half of the tournament he didn't play well, but the second half Sunrisers didn't do anything at all. So there must have been much more than lack of form that might have made them ask him to stay back. That's something that we'll probably not know. But as far as Australia is concerned, they are all saying, well, that was just probably the kind of thing that he needed to spur him on to the performances that we have seen in this World Cup.
I don't know, Saima, if I'm getting ahead of myself, but the big IPL auction is not too far. I'm guessing there'd be one too many takers for David Warner with this sort of form.
Definitely. Don't forget there are two new teams as well. And don't forget the experience that he brings. He brings leadership qualities as well. And then, of course, the fact that he can, this is a game made for him, 2020. He's so energetic in the field as a fielder. Look at the way he dives and throws himself about. So he would definitely be right at the top of, people wanted by the two new teams or any of the other teams, because it doesn't look that the Sunrisers are going to retain him.
Okay, just trying to understand, what must be David Warner's mindset. We spoke about that incident where he was asked to stay back in the hotel. I wonder if certain incidents like that really fired him up. We know he's a dogged sort of a character, likes to really fight back when he's pushed against the wall. In terms of his approach in this particular tournament, just tell us, sometimes when players are completely out of form, they can go into a shell. We don't see that with a player like David Warner. In fact, when he's out of form, he'll come out and even attack the bowlers even more. What does that tell you about his mindset, his makeup when he gets onto the playing field?
What it tells you is that he's a positive thinking person. He does not look back at what has happened. And because if you keep looking back at what has happened, whether you've done well or whether you've done badly, it actually takes your focus away from what is in front of you. And that is where you stumble. So what he must have done, and I can't really read his mind, all I can say is he would have said to himself, what has happened in the past is past. The future is ahead of me. The future is in my hands. I tried my best in the past, didn't quite work, but I'm going to go and trust my game. That is his game. That's the way he plays. He trusted his game and he played it and he was successful. Also, don't forget, at the start of this ICC World couple of matches, he didn't do well. And again, there was a bit of talk about his place in the side. But again, it's his self-belief that has got him to this situation here today.
All right, what a star-studded knock there by David Warner, getting 53 for his team at double quick time at a strike rate of 140. Now I'm going to talk about the highest scorer. That was 77, not out by Mitchell Marsh. Anyway, we have short memories, so I'm just taking you back and all our viewers a little bit back. In this very tournament, in that game versus England, he was dropped from the playing 11, let alone bat at number 3. And then what England does is hammers Australia by 8 wickets. Promptly, he's got back into the playing 11 in the next match. And from there on, as they say, rest is history, has been scoring plenty of runs, averages 87. I'm just looking at that in the 4 games after that England game that he was dropped. Sometimes these small little things, I wonder if Australia have England to thank for that hammering to have brought back Mitchell Marsh into the 11.
You could say that. Sometimes, you being left out of the team, like Warner was left out of the Hyderabad team, that can spur you on. That can be just a little, wake-up call. Maybe you can call it a kick on the backside, whatever it is. It actually makes a difference, because then you come back a lot more determined. At the end of the day, it is your self-belief that matters. If you believe that you deserve to be dropped, then you are not going to get up and look to get back in the team. But if you think, no, I deserve to have got another chance, then you will go practice hard, you will train hard, you will put yourself in a physical condition to be able to meet the challenge, and then mentally make yourself strong, because then eventually, even if you're physically fit, it's a mental battle that you're going to win, that you can do it. And that's what both Warner and Marsh have done in the second half of this tournament.
All right, so stay on with us. Plenty to talk to you about. But meanwhile, we've been discussing these fine performances by David Warner, Mitchell Marsh, and then Hazelwood with the ball a little earlier. Here are the highlights from this final, which Australia has won.
Put in to bat first, New Zealand got off to a slow start. New Zealand's hero from their semi-final victory, Daryl Mitchell, tried to force the pace with a maximum, but he perished just a few balls later. With Martin Guptill struggling with his timing, New Zealand could only manage 32 runs from the power play. It was only after 10 overs that New Zealand threw caution to the wind, with Kane Williamson cutting loose. Even as Guptill departed for a 35-ball 28, the Kiwi captain started smashing anything and everything. Within no time, New Zealand had more than made up for their slow start. Mitchell Starc, who was Williamson's favourite target, was having a terrible night, leaking fours and sixes all over the park. Even as Josh Hazelwood had Williamson's number in the 18th over, his onslaught had put the Kiwis on track for a competitive total as they eventually finished with 172. Australia started poorly, with Aaron Finch once again departing for a single-digit score. The Aussies were 43 for 1 at the end of their power play, and soon Marsh and Warner began to take chances and took their team to 82 for 1 at the halfway stage. Men in yellow were cruising and Warner reached his third half-century of the tournament, but the left-hander had to depart soon after for a 38-ball 53. Mitchell Marsh, however, continued to mount pressure on the Kiwis with his big hitting, and another 6 brought up his 50 of just 31 deliveries. No way the Aussies were losing from here, and with the required run rate well below 6, they were in touching distance of the victory. Soon they crossed the finish line to lift their maiden T20 World Cup title that they had been waiting for 14 years. Sports Bureau, India Today.
All right, as we were talking about the Australian team, they won this encounter with 8 wickets and had an over to spare. Sunil Gavaskar still with us. We were talking about Mitchell Marsh and the way he's been playing in this tournament and that time that he was dropped from the squad as well. The one thing that I noticed while looking at the highlights, the very first ball that he faces, right from the word go, he was able to hit those boundaries. Must take a special kind of talent to see the ball so well right from the word go.
He had a very good innings in the semi-finals as well, and then, although he didn't get to a half-century, it was he and Warner again who gave Australia that stabilising stand that they needed after Finch had gone for a duck. So again, with Finch departing early, him getting going was fantastic, and it actually tells you the confidence that he was in, because that really wasn't all that bad a ball, but that first ball, he flicked it away for a 6, much in the manner of Surya Kumar Yadav, playing his first ever ball for India, flicking Jofra Archer for a 6 over square leg. It was pretty similar kind of shot, and after that there was no looking back as far as Mitchell Marsh was concerned.
I'm just now going to look at New Zealand's approach. We were talking about that 172 odd that they got, looked like a very competitive total. But going back to the start that they had in the power play, 32 odd runs is what they got with 1 wicket. And then I was even looking at the first 10 overs, 57. From there on, of course, they had plenty of runs that Williamson got. But now in hindsight, looking back, do you think the fact that they play with 1 batsman less forces their hand to be a bit more circumspect to begin with? Now in hindsight, they will look back and said, we could have gone a bit harder to start?
Well, they could have also sent in Jimmy Neesham. They could have sent in Jimmy Neesham ahead of Glenn Phillips because he was a left-hander. With Glenn Phillips coming into bat, yes, Glenn Phillips got a 6 and a boundary, but maybe Jimmy Neesham could have turned it around, added those extra 10 or 20 runs that could have happened. But again, these are ifs and buts of the game. Yeah. At the start, the way that Guptill got bogged down was a bit surprising because he's one of those aggressive players, not as consistent as David Warner, but when he gets going, he can take the game away. He got unbelievably bogged, and we saw 35 deliveries to get to 28. That is so unusual, and that is what pushed New Zealand back. If I recall correctly, in the first 8 overs, they had 24 dot balls. Yeah. 24 dot balls. That is pretty much 50% were dot balls. That is not acceptable in T20 cricket, because in the first 6 overs of the power play, you should probably be having no more than maybe 6 to 8 dot balls. But 24 dot balls, that is what pushed New Zealand back.
So I'm trying to think why that must have been. And my mind goes back to the 2015 50 over final. I know different formats, but we remember at that very moment, you had McCullum saying that, listen, we're going to go all out. We remember, him starting off aggressively in that first over, gets out. And then many blame New Zealand saying that, listen, this is the final. You didn't have to have this sort of approach. You could have batted a bit more sensibly, given a better target to Australia. Sometimes those things are you a little bit more careful. It's a similar sort of final that you're playing in the World Cup, same opposition. Could that have been the reason they thought, okay, let's have a solid base here and then build on from there?
Well, you've got to say that, Mitchell Starc was not at his best. He went for 60 runs in his 4 overs. So he was probably the one they were looking to maybe play easily. Instead, he gave the runs. Hazelwood is not an easy bowler to take on. Everybody knows that. Even at the IPL, We've seen the first couple of overs when the ball is hard and new. With his height, he gets the ball to bounce a little bit more, even on the flattest of pitches, and then again gets the ball to move away just that little bit. So yes, you could say that the Australians bowled well. But what was surprising was even the singles were missing. Those 24 dot balls, one is not saying that 24 dot balls should be boundaries, but if those 24 dot balls, even if there were, say, 18 singles had been taken, those 18 runs could have been the difference.
Fair point. And probably, Saima, the pressure was building. Now in hindsight, we're saying that, okay, Williamson went on to get 80 odd, but he could have very well been out on 21 at that catch being taken by Hazelwood, and then you wouldn't have reached this far if you had this approach that you're talking about, not even taking those singles.
But Williamson, therefore, had to do something. That is where you saw an unusual part of Williamson's batting. There was nothing crass about it. Unusual in the sense that he doesn't play the lofted shot still, he is well set. But here, recognizing the situation, that the situation was grave, it was dire, that they were not going to get anything, he went after the bowling, playing cricketing shots, lofted extra cover drives, lofted off drives, then playing the pull shot again, lofting it, pull shot, you can play lofted anyway. But I think it was the way he recognized the situation, recognized that Guptill was struggling with his timing, that they went to play in that manner. But clearly, I think those 24 dot balls in that first 8, I don't know the stats at the end of 20 overs, how many dot balls that New Zealand had. But have a look and compare it to the Australian innings and how many dot balls Australia had in their 19 overs. And that will tell you the story.
Right, very valid point Sunil Gavaskar makes there. Let's compare the dot balls between the two teams. The other thing that really stood out for the Australian team, apart from taking singles, they were also making ones into twos. If you looked at David Warner running really well between the wickets, probably those little things made a huge difference. But even though New Zealand may have ended up on the losing side, the final would have been a single-sided affair if not for Kane Williamson. The New Zealand skipper got back into form just when the Black Caps needed him the most. Even though his fantastic knock of 85 went in vain, he was the reason why New Zealand could record 170 plus total despite a poor start. Here's how he turned the Kiwi innings around.
Innovation, and it was required for...
Kane Williamson was cool, calm and composed, as always. Against the Aussies, Williamson was all those things and ferocious. Before the final, Williamson had managed just 131 runs from his 6 innings in the tournament. And at the end of 10 overs, the Kiwis were 57 for 1, with Williamson batting on 18 of 19.
Goes full again, and again it peels off the outer half of...
But as they say, cometh the hour, cometh the man. Williamson rose up to the challenge, dropped on 17 at fine leg. Williamson was unforgiving and made the Aussies pay dearly. Runs flew from Kane Williamson's bat. It felt like everything he was hitting was going to the fence. Williamson took a special liking to Mitchell Starc, carting him all over the park. He took 19 and 22 runs off Starc's second and third overs of the innings. Williamson continued to make merry, with Australia struggling to stop the flow of runs.
It truly is. He's so understated as a batsman in this format.
The Black Cap skipper eventually departed in the 18th over, but not before he had smashed 85 runs off 48 balls. He also equalled the highest individual score in a World T20 final. And with his 10 fours and 3 sixes, Williamson's knock left the Aussies shell-shocked. New Zealand finished their innings with 172 on the board, a score that seemed a far-fetched dream at the end of their 10 overs. But there was one man who turned it into a reality.
Williamson, apart from that little slice of luck, and everyone needs one.
Sports Bureau, India Today.
Williamson.
All right, Zainwa, as we said, even though Kane Williamson has ended up on the losing side, probably one of the finest innings of this particular World Cup. The way he batted, must feel very proud in terms of his performance, because remember, when you were coming into this particular final, we were talking about how he hasn't done very well against Australia, how he hasn't done well in this tournament, but when it really mattered, he stepped up and played like a captain.
He's a terrific player, isn't he? He's a terrific leader as well. look at the sporting way in which he accepted this defeat. It must be very, very frustrating when you play the innings like that, and then to find yourself in a losing position. That does not give you any joy. But having said that, there haven't been many finer innings than that, because there was that classical Williamson at play. There was, like I said, nothing cross-batted or nothing that you could say, nothing ugly about his batting. And it was something delightful to watch. Wish he had gone on to get 100, because then again, those 15 extra runs could have made the match go into the final over. Maybe things could have been a little bit different. But again, ifs and buts in cricket, that is the beauty of cricket. There are so many ifs and buts that you can discuss endlessly.
All right. What a fascinating batsman Kane Williamson is. No matter what the format, he just adjusts himself and bats according to the situation. That's one of his best qualities. Simon, I know the headlines would be stolen by all the batsmen. Not that you'd be complaining. The likes of David Warner as well as Mitchell Marsh. But I'm just looking at Hazelwood's figures. 3 wickets for just 16 runs, 4 runs and over in a game where both teams were scoring 9 runs per over.
Well, he's difficult to get away. He's like Glenn McGrath. He hits that off-stump line, just does a little bit. He's not a big mover of the ball. In the air, he moves it a little bit. But after pitching, there is very little, just like Glenn McGrath. And his length and line make it difficult. Then add to it his height. His height, he's a little bit taller than Glenn McGrath. And therefore, with the way he uses his wrist, the ball bounces just a little bit more and makes it difficult for the batsman to collar him. And in 20 overs game, to take 3 wickets and give up a less than 4 runs and over, that is fantastic. Or give 4 runs and over, that is fabulous.
So we were talking about the dot balls, and you said New Zealand must analyze, why did they have so many dot balls? In whatever 28 dot balls that they had in the innings, 18 came off Hazelwood. Why do you think it was really tough? I mean, scoring boundaries is one thing. Why was it so tough to even get a single off him?
Because he mixed it well. He also has got a very good slow delivery. Hazelwood, he can bowl the slow delivery without any visible change in action till the release of the ball. It's only after the release of the ball that the batsman realizes that it's a slower one. It's not going to come at about 140 kilometers per hour. Then to make that bat speed adjustment is just that little bit difficult. Either you miss-hit it and hit it up in the air, and that's how he gets his wickets, or you hit it straight to the fielder. Also, the Australians had done their homework. Their field placing was spot on. They knew that the New Zealanders like to go leg side, go down towards the leg and try and open up on the offside. And they had packed that offside with more fielders. And that's why even the singles dried up for New Zealand.
Okay, if you had Hazelwood on one side, then you really need to mention Trent Boult as well, because he was outstanding with the ball. Like Kane Williamson, he's ended up on the losing side, but look at those figures. In 4 overs that he bowled, picked up 2 wickets, giving away just 18 runs. Once again, an economy of just 4.50. And this has been the case throughout this tournament. Now, what does he remind you of? Does he remind you of a very thinking sort of a bowler? Because we see him really change things. If he gets hammered for one sort of length, quickly he'll bowl the short pitch delivery, quickly he'll turn to a slower ball. Do you think he comes across as one of those sharp bowlers who's always studying the batsman?
Well, look at Aaron Finch's dismissal, for example. That tells you how much thought he puts into his bowling. Because in the same over, Finch had gone down the pitch and driven him straight for a boundary. And then after a couple of deliveries, he realized that Finch is not going to step down every ball. But after a couple of deliveries, he'll try to do that again. So for that particular delivery, he read Finch's mind and bowled that slower delivery. Also a little bit shorter. And what did happen? Finch hit it up in the air, and the fielder at deep square leg took a very, very good catch. But it was Boult who created that opportunity by thinking and anticipating what the batsman was going to do. Look, it's all in this format of the game, more than any other format, batsmen and bowlers are trying to read each other's mind. What is this bowler going to bowl to me now? What should I be doing? Bowler is thinking, what is the batsman going to do now? I bowled him a couple of dot balls. Is he going to give me the charge? Is he going to go leg side? Is he going to go offside and try and scoop me? So when the bowler gets it right, then he gets the batsman out. When the batsman gets it right, he gets a boundary or a 6.
All right, Sunil, thanks so much for that lengthy discussion, such an enriching sort of discussion that we had with you. We could really sum up the entire final, the good bits, the bad bits, what are the things that New Zealand did right or wrong to end up on the losing side. But remember, this was also New Zealand's first T20 World Cup final. They all they need to do is just look at Australia. They played a final before versus England, lost that, but now have come back to win their first T20 World Cup title. You never know, the Aussie team could do that in the future. Currently though, they are still the best test team in the world. Sunny, thanks so much for joining us. So we have a new champion, the 6th country to lift the T20 World Cup. We leave you with some fine moments of Australian performance throughout this tournament.
Maxwell looks to finish it, and he might have done it as well. 5 times 50 over men's World Cup champions, a team that can never ever be written off. And they've finally got their hands on a men's T20 World Cup trophy, and it is richly deserved. Improve with every game, have Australia. They are now a champion team.
The Aussies, Glenn Maxwell finishes off with a switch it to